Hello, RPYA. I'm excited to be with you tonight. If you don't know who I am, that's totally all right. I'm an introvert, and we love to be forgotten at times, so it's great. But my name is Joel, and I'm one of the pastors here at the Church at Rocky Peak, and it's exciting for me to be here because the last time I was with this ministry was like 12 years ago. So like back in the day, I'm old enough now that I have a back in the day reality in my life. But like I was a part of Rocky Peak staff once upon a time. I was the college pastor. So like Kelly learned a thing or two from me. So make sure you tell him that next week when you see him. Yeah, throw it down. And then our family, we moved away on this incredible adventure. We went to Canada and like got frostbite. And then God's like, it's time to come home. And so we got to come back this year to Rocky Peak. And so it's so fun to be back. And it's just good to be here. And so I was talking with Kelly. He's like, Joel, would you come and teach? And I was like, sure. What do you want me to talk about? And he's like, we're in this cool series that we're going to be jumping back into. But one thing he said, like, I have to make sure I do is like table time. He's like, you have to make sure that people are talking at the tables. And I was like, I can do that. So we're going to start with that. But we're just going to make it super easy and light as we jump in. And I love fall, especially because I know winter's not coming here like it was in Canada. And so I just, like a simple thing, one of the things I love growing up, and I still love being grown up, is Halloween. It's where my inner nerd can come out and be whoever I want to be. And so, like, as you think, what's like the favorite costume you ever wore, like the favorite person you ever got to be? And if you don't have a good one, then what was like the worst costume you ever wore or you ever wore? So take that to the tables, and if you don't know each other, introduce yourself real quick and just be like, oh, this one time it was sick, I was. And then roll with it. Does that make sense? Okay. Sweet. Talk amongst yourselves. Love it. All right. Let's wrap it up and come back to the front. Man, you guys are into it. Love it. Chatting with the guys up front and just asking some of the things. Well, my family and I, we lived in Canada for like 6.5 years. Like, we're native Southern Californians. And so it's like, hey, what was your favorite Halloween costume? Up there, it didn't matter because whatever you put on, you then had like this parka you had to wear over it. So it was just like, what are you for Halloween? I'm cold. That's all it was. So, but like one of the things that I love is being a dad. So I've got these two daughters. They're teenagers now, and so it's so fun. But when they were little, like Halloween was the best. And we'd always try to do like this family theme of a costume. So like I was telling them, like, I always loved to like be a pirate. And so one year, like, we're all gonna be pirates. And then my one daughter's like, I want to be Belle. And I'm like, you're ruining it. Like, no. And then we're like, okay, maybe you're the princess the pirates capture, and we just rolled with it. But I remember this one year we were sitting around the table as a family, and we got out the pumpkins. Like, how many of you are in the carving the pumpkins, right? Yes. Like, and then some of you are like, I have a rash, I can't do it, right? So then you watch your friends. But this one year I was so excited because my oldest daughter was old enough to really get into it with me. And I'm like, okay, this year's going to be like the best moment of carving pumpkins we're going to have. Like, this moment, we're going to talk about this like 25 years from now. You're going to tell your grandchildren about it. It's going to be this bond. I was so excited to do this moment. So we picked out this really intricate design, and we just went to town. So just like got it and just pulled all the gunk out and then started carving it. And this was a meticulous piece of work. Like, I'm working on a Picasso pumpkin. It's going to be that good. And so, like, I'm doing all the intricate cuts and stuff, and I'm just in my mind, I'm like, this is the best bonding moment with my daughter you could ever have. And so we kind of get done with the pumpkin, and we just kind of put it on the table, and I'm just like, yeah. And then I look at my daughter, like 8 years old, and she's just sitting like this. And I realized I carved the pumpkin all by myself. Because I was so caught up in having the perfect pumpkin, I missed the point of what we were trying to do together. Like, this is supposed to be this bonding moment, and I totally, like, excluded her from it. And I wonder, like, have you ever, like, done that in life? Like, you missed the main thing, the most important thing, because you were doing something else? Like, it happens in life, doesn't it? And I wonder, have you ever actually experienced that with Jesus? Like, Jesus, there's moments that you call me into. There's places that you want me to experience you and encounter you. And, like, the thing that you want me to be a part of, it's you, and I get sidetracked. I get focused on something else, and I actually miss the main thing that you have for me. And I think it's really easy to do that. And so as we're jumping back into this series that you've been in, looking at the life of Jesus, we're going to see a case study of how you can how this can actually happen. You can actually miss the main thing by getting caught up with other things. And I love that you guys are walking through this series, through Luke's account of the life of Jesus, the series called Reconstructed. Can I just say how important it is that as you're stepping into this life of faith, as you're discovering who God is and who Jesus is, and wherever you're at on that journey, it's so important that you're looking at the real deal. Like Jesus, I want you, and I want to know who you are, because it's really easy in life to like make up your own stuff, right? Like, and that's dangerous, right? Like when we begin to like say, Jesus, I'm going to tell you who you are, like we actually miss Jesus. And so I love that you're walking through this series, because Luke tells the story of Jesus because he wanted to know for himself back in the day when he wrote it. And so at the very beginning of his whole account of life of Jesus, he says like, hey, I investigated everything, and he's writing to his buddy to help him understand. And so this is who Jesus is. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're like, I want to know who he is, this is a great series to keep pressing into, because you're looking at this account of his life written by a guy that knew the guys who were with Jesus. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. And so as we continue to jump in, we're going to see this moment of missing the point in this person's life when they're literally right there with Jesus. And so it's going to be in chapter 10. So if you have a Bible, I just encourage you to open that up. Or if you got your app or you want to turn it on, we're going to just walk through this little story, and we're going to see this moment where someone was right there with Jesus and then they just missed it. And so this takes place, Luke chapter 10, verse 38 to 41. We're going to just read through some of this and talk about it as we walk through. And we're told this, that as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. And so you got to like put yourself in this moment. So Jesus has been on the scene for a long time now. And so his reputation has gotten big, and people kind of know like, hey, this is that Jesus guy that everyone's talking about, and he's done some extraordinary things, like miraculous things, and people are trying to make sense of that. And like one of the big questions that people are asking is like, who is this? Like he's doing more than just what the teachers in our day do. Like this is incredible. And now suddenly he's showing up and hanging out at your house. Like how excited are you going to be to just like, I want to hear what you have to say. Like if you're hungry for who God really is, and this dude Jesus suddenly shows up, you're going to be like, I want to hear what you have to say about this, because I don't have the full picture of who you are, but I know that you know more than me. And so I want to listen. That's like what we see Mary doing. Mary's just like, Jesus shows up at their house, and she's like, let's just chill. Can you imagine, like, just imagine like some celebrity you wanted to spend time with, and then they just show up at your house and they're like, hey, do you just want to chill? You'd be like, yeah. Like, we were just talking about Star Wars up here in the front because of Halloween. And so, like, we were talking about, like, Han Solo and stuff like. So, like, if Harrison Ford just showed up at my house, I'd be like, dude, just tell me all about Indiana Jones and tell me all about Han Solo. Like, I would want that moment, right? And so here they are, like, just tell us what's going on. And so you just see this exciting moment going on. But someone's about to miss the moment. And so we see this as the story goes on. So he's at this house with these sisters, and they also have a brother. We'll see this later on in our time tonight. But we see this, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. So she's full on in host mode, right? So she's full on like, people are at my house, and I just got to make sure the party's perfect. And so she's missing out what's going on. And so she came to him. She came to Jesus, and she asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Maybe you could read it in more of a whiny voice, right? Like, but that's like, so now imagine this moment. Jesus is hanging out at your house. Everyone's like just soaking up his words. He's sitting there. You're off to the side trying to make sure everything's perfect. And then you're kind of annoyed that you're doing it all by yourself. Like, how would you respond to that moment? Like, I would think like maybe I'd be like, Mary, get in here, right? Like you try, but no, she just walks in and interrupts everything that's going on. And she totally goes to like Jesus, don't you care about me? Don't you care what's going on? Like tell Mary to get in here and help me. Like she's totally missing the point of everything that's going on. So much so that she's now telling Jesus what needs to happen. That's kind of backwards, right? And so now I love Jesus' response to her. And he just says this. He says, Martha, Martha, the Lord answered. And I love it that he says her name twice. It's almost like he's like, Martha, like he's trying to get a hold of her attention, right? Like Martha, snap out of it. He goes, you're worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. And so just catch this, like this big idea that there's this brilliant moment where Jesus has shown up and Martha is completely missing it. And like the big idea here is that when you're taken with the wrong thing, you will miss the main thing. And what's the main thing in this moment? Who's the main thing in this moment? It's Jesus, right? Like Jesus is showing up in their house, and Martha's so caught up in making sure that everything's perfect, she's actually missing it. She's actually missing Jesus, even though he's literally right there. And that's so easy to do. Like, we can get caught up in stuff. And so, like, maybe you're on this journey of faith, and like, Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to figure out what the life is that you have for me. And Jesus is calling you into moments, or he's meeting you in ways that, like, you've never experienced. And suddenly, like, but you're like, I get off track. Like, I start focusing on other things, and I miss you, Jesus. I miss what you're doing in my story. And I just wonder, like, has that ever happened to you? Or have you ever seen that happen in someone's story? And so I want to kick it back to you just for a minute, just to kind of reflect. Like let's just think about what Martha did, and think about like how easy that is. And I want you to spend a couple of times just talking at the table. Hey, how have you seen that? How have you seen someone get so close to Jesus, but they actually missed it because they got caught up in something else? And that's kind of a risky question. So you can talk about someone else if that's more comfortable for you. But if you're really brave, how have you experienced that reality? Like, just in your own story, like, oh, yeah, I totally missed this moment where Jesus wanted to do something because I was focused on something else. So just spend some time reflecting on that. And if you don't know, like, if you're like, is this a safe table to talk at? I don't know what to tell you. I hope it is. So, you know, and if not, then the whole table's missed the main thing. And then you're like, you all did it, right? So there you have something to share. So give it a moment and chase after that with each other. How have you made Martha's mistake when it comes to Jesus? Like, how have you missed the main thing because you were focused on something else? Go. All right. Let me hear from a couple of brave people who'd be willing to like answer. How have you seen that, like the mistake Martha's making? Like, she's letting another thing distract her from the main thing. She's missing it. Have you seen that or experienced it? Any brave people? Here we go.
So like I've been serving on like the worship team and stuff for like
All right.
most of my life, and I feel like that would be the distraction, even though it is a good thing.
Yep. All right.
Distract me from like worshiping God while I'm doing it.
Yeah, all right. He's talking about like serving on the worship team, which is like a really good thing, but oftentimes you can get caught up like the music or whatever, right? And it's just like, oh, but it's about you. Yeah, totally, for sure. Someone else. Yep. Oh, that's it. I mean, it's so brilliant like that we can, in our pursuit of knowledge, which is a good thing, we can miss Jesus because we think it's about making sure we have the right thinking, which again is important. But it's like, but the right thinking is meant to lead me to Jesus, not just land at the right thing. Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Yeah, I mean, I was just reflecting on this, like as I was preparing, and I was like, so many times there's things that will often cause me to miss the main thing, to miss Jesus, because I'm reflecting on it. And like what you were just sharing, like knowledge or service, like those can be things that are in my story that can do that. Like there's oftentimes, like I remember when I was like going through school and like doing all this training stuff because I wanted to be a pastor one day. Like sometimes the title became more important, right? Like, oh, I want to be that guy instead of being with the guy, right? Like, I mean, it just happens. That's exactly what we do. Or like theology. Like theology is this beautiful field of study to help us understand who we see God revealed to us through the scriptures. It's a good thing, but oftentimes we make it the main thing, right? And so that's not the whole knowledge thing, right? And let me tell you, good theology matters, because if you don't have good theology and you start swallowing bad theology, that leads you into crazy places. So again, theology matters, but one of the dangers is when we make it the main thing, we can actually, in our pursuit of wanting to know God, miss God. I mean, that's why you see Jesus clashing with the religious establishment in his day, because they were caught up in making sure that they were right more than that they were knowing God. Like, they missed it. Sometimes, let's risk a little bit tonight. How many of you got some mess in your story? Yeah, 3 of us. Sweet. All right. Yeah. Right? And like, I don't know if you ever feel this way, but like when you just like get caught up in that mess, whatever, like the temptation or the struggle or whatever it is, a lot of times what I find is that I pull back because I feel like I got to clean myself up before I can step back in. And like, that's the religious game that we can fall into, like the trap of religion. And it's like, I think what Jesus wants to do in those moments is he wants to bring beautiful correction to us, but we have to let him meet us as we are. And so often I'll miss that moment where he wants to offer me this grace and mercy that I need in those places where I'm struggling, so that he can bring me into new life and victory. But what I'll do is I'll miss Jesus because I think like, no, I have to be good enough before I can encounter you. And I think what Jesus is like, just come. Like, I'm the thing that's going to transform that. I'm the one. But it's so easy for us to do that. And I think what happens is that we can miss it. Like when we're taken with the wrong things, we can miss the main thing. And what's crazy to me to think about that is that the wrong thing isn't even always a bad thing. It can actually be a good thing, like what we were talking about, like leading worship. Because is what Martha's doing a bad thing? No, she's like serving people. Like, isn't that one of the things we're called to do as followers of Jesus? Like Jesus says, the greatest among you will be a servant. So, I mean, you could almost look at this story and be like, Martha's right. Shame on you, Mary, for just lounging and not, like, you could totally read the story like that. And yet Jesus is like, hey, Martha, somehow you're letting this good thing distract you from the most important thing. You're letting this good thing cause you to actually miss what matters most. And when we let those good things distract us, that's when we can actually begin to miss it. And what happens in that moment is that that good thing becomes the primary thing. Like we shift our focus off of Jesus onto those other things. And like Martha, we become distracted by it. And those lesser things become the more important things to us. And it's a dangerous game because for her, in this moment, it seems almost like if her performance became her priority. But I also wonder, too, if part of that is her identity is wrapped up in this. Like, this is my home, and I have to be the good host, and that's who I am. Therefore, my identity is what matters most versus the one who will ultimately tell me who I am. And you just see this, like, this thing going on. And so, like, never let a good thing cause you to miss out on the main thing, because when you miss Jesus, everything gets out of alignment. Everything gets out of alignment. Like, and it's amazing, like how, like Jesus did not come to start a new religion. And how often then do we take Jesus and turn him into a religion? Because we've missed the main thing, which is Jesus, you're the one that gives me life, and so I want to follow you. And it seems like whatever's going on here, what Martha is missing in this moment is what Mary is stepping into. Like there's something like Mary gets it in this moment. Jesus, you're here. It's all about you. I just want to be with you and learn from you. And when that begins to happen in our life, we begin to experience what I like to call like the healthy flow. The healthy flow of life coming to us from Jesus, coming out of our life through Jesus. And what that often means, like the healthy flow is this orientation that everything I begin to do with my life flows first and foremost from my being with Jesus. And when we get that backwards, what oftentimes happens is that we start to live performance life. Like I have to earn it, I have to prove who I am. And so we flip it. Unhealthy flow is that my being comes from my doing, right? And so that's what the world teaches us. Unless you do something great, you're nobody. And the amazing thing is Jesus says, you're somebody because I love you. Now let me teach you how to step into the fullness of that identity and embrace the things I have for you. And what's beautiful about that is like when it's time to serve or whatever, I just offer myself to him, and I don't get hung up in whether I was great or not because it's not about me, it's about him. I mean, let me tell you, I'm amazed that Jesus will take somebody like me and let me do the things that I do. Because like I am like social, awkward, geek, nerd, I'm like, Jesus, what are you, like me? What, have you not seen me? Like, why would you pick me? And I think sometimes she's like, because I get more credit, dude, let's do this, right? And I'm like, okay, for sure, right? Like those kind of things. But what I love about that is like, however you find yourself, you're not disqualified if you give yourself to him because he qualifies you. He gives you identity, he gives you purpose, and then you step into a new life and you begin to see this. And so when Jesus calls us to follow him, this is the most important thing about understanding. When Jesus says, follow me, we follow him. Yet so often what I want to do is then invite him to follow me, right? Like, hey, Jesus, here's how I want my life to go. Here's the story I want to live. Here's the choices I want to make. So would you sign off on this? And I think Jesus is like, it doesn't work like that. Like, no, like I'm the main thing. And Mary's experiencing this in some beautiful way. She's stepping into it. And so whatever's going on with life flows out of that. And we're going to see in just a little bit how you see that there's a beautiful alignment in Mary's life as we're going to jump to another story in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to like ask the question, like how do you know when your focus is shifted? Because I don't think if we just sat down with Martha in that moment where she's so frustrated in the kitchen or wherever she was to say, hey, Martha, do you realize you're kind of like you're missing it? Because I think if she could have caught herself, she would have had a very different conversation with Jesus, right? Instead of coming into that conversation he had. And so how do you know when your focus is shifted? How do you know when you're becoming distracted by something else and you're beginning to miss the main thing? And this is what I just want to unpack a couple of things that maybe looking at Martha's life, that if we can begin to recognize if this is happening in my story, if this is happening in your story, it might be a sign to you that you're letting the other thing become the main thing instead of Jesus. And so here's one way that maybe you can begin to recognize that this is happening, like you've shifted your focus, you're being distracted by something else. If you begin to compare yourself to somebody else, something's wrong, right? Because this is what's going on. Like here's Martha, like she's looking out, and there's Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus, and she's like, so there's just this tension going on in her. And there's a comparison going on in that moment. And let me tell you, like comparison is a thief. It will steal your ability to enjoy and celebrate what God's up to. It'll kill your ability to enjoy what God's doing in your story, and it will kill your ability to celebrate what God's doing in someone else's story. So I remember when I was going through school, and I was growing up on the other side of LA, and got to serve in this church that I grew up in as a teenager, and I loved being a part of this youth group and all this stuff. And so then I was going to school, and I got to be an intern at this church, and so I did a couple of years interning working with middle school students. And so Johnny was here last week, right? Yes, and so like inviting you into like serving them. If you choose to do that, God bless you, right? Because middle school is a unique animal that needs people that know how to walk with them. And so I did that for 2 years, and then I thought, yeah, it's not for me, because of just how I figured out like who I was. And so then I started interning with the high school students at my church, and it was like I just found my jam. That was my groove. I loved it for that point in my life. And then I remember my buddy who was the high school or the junior high pastor, like a really good friend of mine, a mentor of mine. He was like, hey, I'm leaving to take this new job at another church down in San Diego. And he's like, Joel, I want you to become the junior high pastor. And so like in so many ways, I'm like, this is the dream. Like I've done my time, I've earned it, and now I get to step into this thing. And I was so aware of what God was doing in my story. And I'm like, God, I think like you're pulling me down a different path. So I don't think this is for me, even though like from a career move and all that, it would have been great. And I just remember saying like, hey, like I'm flattered, thank you, but I'm loving what I'm learning here. I think I have some more learning to do before I even step into something like that, you know. And so he's like, hey, no problem. So one of my best friends, my roommate, Mike at the time, was also working at the church. And so basically he wound up becoming the junior high pastor. And I'm 3 years older than him, and I'm further down the road than him, and I know I'm smarter than him. See where I'm going with what's about to happen? And so I remember, like, they hire him, and the day comes, and I'm walking into, like, where the church offices were, and there on the door, I see his name go on the door, and something dark in me wakes up. And I'm like, he doesn't deserve that. Who does he think he is? And we were roommates at college at the time, and so we had these loft beds that were above the desk, and so like if you sat up at night, you can kind of look over the loft bed, and you could see your buddy kind of thing, and I was just like, I could throw a pillow over there, and if it landed just right, and he didn't wake up, who's to know? Like I'm like dark. Yeah, you're like, don't judge me. I'm just telling you, I had some dark thoughts in that moment, right? And it was just like, oh, like because there was this comparison going on within me that was just like, do you think maybe I'm missing the main thing in a moment like that? Is somebody figuring out the pillow thing? You might need to explain that to the person. I was thinking of killing my roommate in the darkest of moments. Yeah, we should all laugh at that because that's not dark at all, right? Like there was just like this thing, and so like because what was going on inside of me is I'm missing like, Jesus, you've got a path and a story for me, and I want to walk with you in that. That's the main thing. What are you doing in my story? But I was getting caught up in this to the point that I was having some serious dark thoughts. And I remember I finally just had to like walk into the high school pastor I was working with and just tell him like, I just need to tell you something, and I hope it's okay. And I just told him what was going on. And it was weird. Once I shared that, it was just like it all disappeared. Because as if God's like, okay, good, you let it out, and now you know the story I have on you. And suddenly something was given back to me. This comparison thief was gone, and I could suddenly enjoy the path I was on and celebrate my friend for the path God had him on. But that comparison was helping me understand, Joel, there's something going on. You're focused on the wrong thing right now, right? And so you see that with Martha. And so maybe like for you, as you're just kind of wrestling with like, God, when am I caught up with the wrong thing instead of you, Jesus, is the main thing? Maybe there's some comparison going on in your story. Here's something else that we see coming out in Martha's life too. Not only does she compare it, she begins to complain about it. Okay, I don't know if there are any poker players in. I actually don't know if I'm supposed to talk to you about poker or not because you're adults, but I don't really know. I'm back. But like, do you know what a tell is when you're playing poker? Right, yeah. It's when the person kind of like lets you know they've got a good hand or they're bluffing or something. If there is complaining coming out of you, that's a tell that something's gone wonky in your heart. That's the technical term, right? Like there's something going on here because complaining reveals something about you. And it's not fun to talk about this, but this is what complaining reveals about you. A sense of entitlement. I deserve. Because think about what Martha goes to say to Jesus. I mean, imagine, this is Jesus, and she walks up to him, and she's like, tell her to help me. Like, because I deserve this help, Jesus. Like, talk about missing it, right? I mean, this is Jesus, and she's like, instead of saying, Jesus, could you speak to me about life and where I need to go? I'm going to tell you how it's supposed to be. And so there's this ugly complaining that's going on, and when that begins to surface in your life, that should be a tell. Like, hey, Jesus, there's something off, and maybe I'm focused on something else. Because when I pursue you, there is no entitlement. When I pursue you, I lay all my rights at your feet because I don't want to continue living this broken life. I lay them all at your feet so I can step into something new with you. That's called freedom. When you get over yourself, that's called freedom. The world can't teach us that because the world is consumed with self. Jesus says, let me teach you how to live a free life by getting over yourself in the best of ways so that you can walk into the path I have for you. And so we see this going on. And so here's Martha falling into these traps, right? And so this is why Jesus calls her out. And he's like, hey, you're worried about a lot of stuff. And there's only a couple things that matter. In fact, there's only one thing that matters. And Martha, you're missing it. I'm right here. And you're missing it. So what did Mary get right? You look at the story. What did she get right? What did she do? And I love it because what does Jesus say about her? Mary chose what? What did he say? You got to like, oh, what did we read a couple of minutes ago? Like, she chose what is better, right? She chose what is better. I mean, Mary kept her focus on the main thing. She kept her focus on Jesus. And when we get that right, everything flows out of that. So like if you were here at our main service this week, like Dre, he really hit this point hard when he was talking about these practical steps that we see in life, that if we keep Jesus as the main thing, everything flows. My sense of identity, my sense of being loved, that fills me to the point that I can love difficult people. Like everything flows out of this. That healthy flow begins to happen, and we begin to experience a resonance and an alignment with Jesus that just puts us back into the place that we were meant to be. Like Jesus comes to show us the kind of human we were meant to be had we never walked away from God. And when we begin to align our life with him, focus on him, he brings us back into that sense of alignment. And as we keep our focus on him, some beautiful things begin to take place in us and through us. One of the beautiful things that happens when we begin to focus on Jesus is that our life begins to become about worship. Like I begin to look at who God is and who I discover Jesus to be, and I'm like, I just want to tell you how great you are, not because you need to be reminded of that, but because I need to be reminded of that. Because I chase after things that I think are great that will never fulfill me, but you will. And I need to tell you how great you are, so I pursue you with everything that I've got. And worship begins to flow out of our life when we focus on Jesus. So like when we show up and we sing songs as worship, we don't show up and be like, I don't really like this song. Even though some songs are definitely better than other songs, that's just reality, right? But suddenly we realize this song is nothing more than a tool for me to worship you. And so I'm going to enter in because I want to focus my life on you. Service has a totally different response. I step into areas of service not because I need to prove myself, not because I'm trying to earn myself up to some kind of like ranking system. I step into areas of service because I suddenly realize, look at what you've done for me. And I'm so grateful. I want to be a part of the story now. I want to be a part of what you're doing, not just in my life, but what you want to do in other people's lives. And so, Jesus, I give myself to you. Whether I'm serving in some context with the church I'm a part of or just wherever I live my life, I show up and I serve the people around me. I show up to the classroom. I show up to the workplace. I show up in my family. And I'm like, how can I help serve the people around me? because Jesus, I want to reflect you in this world because you've transformed my life. And when we begin to do this, we step into this bigger story God's telling all around us. And I want you to catch this out of Mary's life because sometimes we see little snippets of people in the story and we miss like a bigger part of their story that's going on. And so Mary's response to Jesus in this moment, not missing the main thing, transforms the flow of her life to a point that we see in another account of the life of Jesus, John's account of the life of Jesus, this beautiful moment where Mary seems to be in alignment with Jesus, that she seems to get something that's going on that everyone else is missing. And so we see this in John chapter 12. Mary's focus leads to this beautiful alignment with Jesus. And so John 12 follows John 11. And so remember I told you kind of like Jesus had some great relationship with this family, with Martha and with Mary and their brother Lazarus. And so if you're familiar with stories, you might know this. Lazarus is the dude that dies, and then Jesus shows up and brings him back from the dead. So maybe you're not familiar with that story, that's great. But it's like this incredible moment where like Jesus intentionally delays so that when he shows up, Lazarus is already dead. And you're like, Jesus, that seems harsh. And he's like, I'm bigger than you and I know more than you, so just roll with me, right? Like, you're like, okay. And then he brings Lazarus back to life, and everyone's like, what is this? And so now they're all chilling at the house, hanging out after this moment, and this beautiful thing happens. And so we see this, John 12, 1 through 8. It says, 6 days before the Passover, huge Jewish celebration. And by the way, this wasn't any Passover. This is going to be the Passover where Jesus has his final meal before he goes to the cross. So Jesus is walking towards the last days of his life before he goes to the cross. And so 6 days before that moment, before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany. That's where this family lives, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. And here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. And I love this. It seems as if Martha's figured something out too, because now she's serving and there's no complaining, there's no comparing. She's like, oh, I can actually enjoy this now. And then this beautiful moment happens. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, which is an expensive perfume. You're like, yeah, what? Like, it says it in the text. That's how I know. It's not like I go and buy nard and like, I like this stuff. But this is like this is like really expensive perfume. And look at what she does. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So like this is like this beautiful act of worship that's going on here. And there's so much like culture that's beautiful about this. Like back in that day, like we didn't have shoes or like hygiene the way we do. So you're walking around like in your Birkenstocks or whatever, your feet are just filthy. And so you'd show up to someone's house and somebody would wash your feet. It was an act of service. Usually it was the lowest person. And so Mary's doing that to a certain extent. But she's not just doing it with water, she's doing it with something very precious and valuable. And it's this beautiful act of worship. And then someone's not having it. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, you familiar with that guy? Yeah, he's not the role model, right? This is the Judas that betrays Jesus. So Judas Iscariot, who later betrayed Jesus, objected. He goes, why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. And then John, who knew Judas in the whole story, he gives us a little commentary. He goes, Judas didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, a keeper of the money bag. He used to help himself to what was put into it. So Judas's complaint is that I could have accessed that money. What a waste, right? And it's just a little sidebar here. When somebody's criticizing your worship of Jesus, like he's criticizing Mary's worship of Jesus, it's really not about you. It's about some dysfunction in their life. And so the best thing to do is like, you better figure that out, bro. I'm going to worship Jesus, right? And so then Jesus' response, leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. And it's this beautiful moment where it seems like somehow Mary gets what's about to happen in a way that none of the others do. Because Jesus has been talking about this. Hey guys, we got to go to Jerusalem. I got to be handed over. Like the Son of Man, I'm going to be crucified, but don't worry, like that's not the end of the story. Like you read the stories, the Gospels, he's telling them this and no one's getting it. Like to the point, like there's a point where Peter will say to Jesus, Jesus, we'll never let that happen to you. And Jesus' response to Peter is like, get behind me, Satan. Like you don't get it. Like you have in mind the things of men. I'm about the things of God. And yet here's Mary in this moment. She knows that there's something epic happening, that Jesus has been talking about this. And she's like, Jesus, I just want to be a part of this with you. And so in some way, like, I want to anoint and prepare you for what's about to happen because I want to be in it with you. Like she's getting it because she has kept him as her focus. And there's something beautiful about that because let me tell you, Jesus is going to be at work in your story, and it's always going to be bigger and grander than what you're going to understand, but there will be moments where you'll have glimpses and you'll get it in better ways if he's the main thing, when you're not letting other things distract you from that. And see, if you want greater alignment with Jesus, then keep him front and center in your life and make sure you're taken with him because he's the main thing. And I love there's this beautiful benefit that we see that happens when Jesus is the main thing. When we're taken with him, no one can take that away. Because did you catch that what he said to Martha about Mary? Mary has chosen what is better, and then Jesus says, and no one can take that away from her. There's something powerful about that, because I don't know about you, but there's so many things that I try to hold on to this life that just get taken away because of life and circumstance or people. But when Jesus is the main thing, that can never be taken from you. And you just see this in this encounter here. Here's Judas trying to take this away from Mary, and Jesus is like, back off, dude. Like, she's with me. Like, no one can take him away from you when he's your main thing. No circumstance can take him away from you when he's your main thing, because when Jesus is the main thing, all of life flows out of that. And here's this beautiful thing that we see going on here with Mary that she gets right. And so I wonder for you tonight, as we just kind of land this moment, what are you focused on right now? Like, is it Jesus or is it something else? And that's not a shame question. It's just an awareness question. Because what I would want is if you could just like put yourself in that place before Jesus and just say, Jesus, help me see if there's something else that I'm distracted by. That's a beautiful thing to realize and then surrender it back to him, because now you can come back to him as the main thing. And I just want to create some space. We're going to go into this time of worship, and worship team, you can make your way on up. But I just want to encourage you in this moment that like this is a chance to not only focus, but maybe for some of us to refocus on Jesus as the main thing. And so I just want to invite you to have this posture of coming before him and saying, Jesus, if there's anything else that's becoming the main thing, even if it's a good thing, would you show me that so I can shift my focus back to you? Because I don't want to make Martha's mistake and miss you. I want to have life with you that comes from you, flows from you, because you are the main thing. And so let me pray for us as we go into this time. And so Jesus, I just want to stop and thank you that we can look into this book and see the journeys of others who've gone before us and learn. Like we can learn from them, learn where they made good choices and learn where they made bad choices. And so could we learn tonight from this story that we need to keep you as the main thing? Because that's the focus of life. All of life flows from that. And so tonight, we just want to come into this moment as we step into this song of worship. Would it shape our reflection? Would it shape our prayer? Would it shape our desire to put you back where you need to be in our lives? And if there's anything that's causing that, a distraction or something that's getting in the way, you have permission to show it to us and invite us to surrender it to you so that we can be back with you. Because you're it, Jesus. You said you were the way, the truth, and the life. And so don't let us miss that tonight. Amen.